Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Eva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trilokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vedya Dravinam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Yatha sarvani bhutani pratibhanti stitani cha yatraivo bhashamam yanti tasmai satyatmane namaha. So where are we in our text?
Chapter 19, number 3 on page 192.
Will you help us out, please, Puneet?
Verse 3 is that?
Yes, number 3.
Dvebije chittavrikshasya vrittivrata-tidharinaha ekam prana parispando dvitiyam dhrida bhavana. There are two origins for the tree of the mind, bearing the creeper of thought. One is the movement of prana, vital air or bioenergy. The second is firm imagination.
And what is the word he's using there for firm imagination?
Dhrida bhavana.
Drida bhav. So, prana is one source for the movement of the mind. When we study pranayama, we separate the main prana into what we call the panchavayu, the 5 subtle airs, which govern the activity in the body. So the main prana is for inhalation, apana is exhalation, or some scriptures say elimination. I always get these two mixed up. Dhyana is digestion. Is that right?
Samana is digestion.
Samana is digestion. Dhyana is circulation. But the one I want to point out is udana, which is thinking. So there's a relationship between the prana and the frequency and volume of thought. So in the Raja Yoga tradition, through pranayama, we gain control of these vital airs, and we can also gain control of the frequency and the volume of thought. One source of that, one source of the origin of our thoughting is prana. The other one is imagination, wishing, willing, intending, ruminating over the past, projecting into the future. Here the scripture is saying these are the two sources of our mental activity. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Yada praspandate prana nida sansparshano ghatah tada samvedana mayam chittam ashu prajayate. When the vital air or bioenergy moves or vibrates, engaged in its contact with the nadis or channels of bioenergy, then the mind consisting of feeling or sensation is born quickly.
Yes. So what are the nadis? These are the channels that are on either side of the spine. They're energetic channels. So even in the West, if any of you have been to a doctor's office and you see the pin, or maybe it's stitched on the coat, what we call the caduceus or caduceus of Mercury. Any of you seen that? And it's a staff, and then you see the two snakes like this, and at the top there's like two wings. Have you seen that thing? It's that the ancient Greek symbol for medicine. It's actually a depiction of the Kundalini. And you have the two snakes moving up the nadis. Let's see. So if you get involved in a Raja Yoga tradition, or in the Tibetan schools, they call it the Mahamudra tradition. You learn these various breathing techniques that are associated with visualization, and then the movement of energies. And you have what we call the bandhas, these blocks where you block the energy from moving after a while. So it is in our ordinary life, the movement of energy up and down the nadis in various ways, because the mind and the body are not separate. One is subtle, one is gross. And the way information moves between the two is by means of the prana, the pranamaya kosha. I look at it this way. If you think of your equipment as an Oreo cookie, one wafer is the mind, the other wafer is the body, but the cream filling is the prana. It's what stands between the two. So some people say, change your thinking and you will change your behavior. Other people say, act your way into right thinking. Yoga says, yes. Both are valid. Both are true. And the connection between mind and body is the prana. Any thoughts on this? This is why, for example, most religious or spiritual traditions, in some form, teach prayer and fasting. You find it both in the East and in the West. Why? What's the value of fasting? And what's the difference between a fast and a diet? Diet's restraining from food so you can lose some weight, or maybe live a little more healthy. Fasting is when you inhibit the intake of food from the body because it affects the prana. Prana kind of moves to the center when you're fasting. What does that do? Because the fifth one of the Panchavayu is Udana. It purifies, it slows down the mind. So you find this suggestion to fast, both the East and the West. Any thoughts on this?
I've always had a hard time with acting my way into right thinking.
Say that again.
Acting my way into right thinking. I've always had a hard time with that. To me, it's how I feel about what I think that controls my actions. I've noticed in silent meditation, I'm quite powerless over both the thoughts that rise in my mind and how they make me feel. But only through really meditation have I been able to analyze what truly controls me and straighten it out. It's more correcting my thinking with awareness is how I've been able to correct my actions.
Well, and both are valid. Both are valid. And you are finding mindfulness a more useful way to correct your actions than just to change your behavior. Other people find the other way more conducive.
Okay, I just don't. I mean, I feel like that's still a thought that proceeds. I mean, I don't know, but whatever.
I get it.
Okay.
That's for you, Justin.
Okay, no worries.
It's a little different. Both are valid. Listen, you're doing fine. What you're doing is okay. All right, next verse.
There was a note that I missed for this.
Okay, read the note.
Note, prana cannot be equated with breath. It is the vital energy that is responsible for physiological functions, and it operates through nervous and other channels in the body. Breathing is only one of its manifestations or effects. Oftentimes, yogic texts designate the breath by the term prana while dealing with the control of bioenergy through the regulation and control of breathing, which is considered the most effective way of controlling prana.
Yes. So it's by control of the breath and through visualization of energy that we control the prana. All right, going on.
Sita sarvasama samved pranaspandena bodhita samvedham adarat yati tato dukkhani chetasah. Consciousness, existing wholly even or unmoved, aroused by the movement of prana or vital air, proceeds towards what is fit to be perceived or known on account of attention or desire. Then arise the sorrows of the mind.
Yes. So because of the energy of prana, mind moves out through the senses, makes contact with the objects. Attachment and aversion get set up, and that leads us into the world of sorrow. Now, if you think you'd like to practice some pranayama, I think first of all, if you can find a teacher, that's best. I am not trained in this, so I cannot help you. But there's an excellent book, which is a good start. It will teach you much. And it's called Light on Pranayama by B.K.S. Iyengar. He is one of the greatest Raja Yoga teachers of the 20th century. And his first book is called Light on Yoga. His second book is Light on Pranayama. I think he wrote a third one. Does anybody know? I'll have to look it up. but you can get some of the basic practices. I use it. I use pranayama. I have what's called white coat hypertension, which means when I go to the doctor and they're going to take my blood pressure goes up. But I have discovered that if I do alternate nostril breathing, my blood pressure just drops. Put 2 fingers on your forehead, thumb on this nostril, 4th finger on that nostril. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Relax, 2, 3, 4. Inhale from this side, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale from this side, 2, 3, 4. Relax. If I do that round 3 or 4 times, my blood pressure drops like magic. Dr. Mark, how do you explain that?
Control of contraction of our arteries.
All I know is it works. I hope it doesn't mean I'm cheating. But there are all sorts of things that through pranayama, you can control many of your bodily issues, your health, nervousness, stuff like that. Many people will do some pranayama in preparation for your meditation. Preparation for your meditation. When you go to Rishikesh, to the Divine Life Society, which is Swami Shivananda's ashram, where Swamiji was initiated, where he took sannyas. They call it the Yoga Vedanta Society because they teach asana. They teach the yogic postures. They teach pranayama. And they teach the Vedanta. Chinmay Mission doesn't get too involved with that sort of stuff. It is not necessary, but if you're called to it, follow your intuition. Some people get great value from it. Any of you done any pranayama? Have you gotten value from it? Still do it? No. All right, next verse.
Yogina chitta shantayartham kurvanti pranarodhanam chittasyot pattima param vasana janitam shrinu. Yogins practice the restraint of prana or the vital air for the sake of tranquility of the mind or the cessation of thought. Here the other manner of the birth of the mind occasioned by mental impressions carried through the succession of previous births.
So,
there's a note.
Go ahead, read the note.
These mental impressions or vasanas constitute the memory of experiences in the present incarnation and the impressions on the unconscious, to use a modern expression of psychology, stored during previous incarnations.
So, if you practice asana postures, pranayama, you may have moments where your mind is absolutely still. But this can result in what we call a jada samadhi. Jada means inert. Your experience is, I see nothing. The individuality is still there. Why? Because the mind is still under the influence of vasana. A vasana is a subset of sanskara. Sanskara is just an impression. So do you know this is a lamp? The fact that you know it's a lamp is a sanskara. Somebody taught it to you. Do you know that's a table? Newborn baby doesn't know it's a table. Doesn't even know to focus its eyes. That's why they put those mobiles and bump them in the crib to teach their eyes to focus and stuff. Sanskaras in and of themselves are not particularly problematic. But a subset, that just means an impression, a subset of sanskara is vasana, comes from the root vasvasati, which means to linger or dwell. Swamiji used to use the image, it's like when a woman comes into a room and she's wearing perfume and then she leaves, and then you walk into the room and you go, oh, so-and-so is here. There's something that lingers. I think it also had fragrance. Isn't that one of the other meanings of vasana? Yeah. So it's something that lingers. So from the standpoint of yoga, a vasana is an impression left in the unconscious as the result of previously performed egoistic actions. So to know that this is a table doesn't cause you to suffer. But when we engage with the world from the viewpoint of I-ness and my-ness, I have done this action. This object belongs to me. I have accomplished this, or the flip side, that object was taken away and I didn't get it, or, oh, they were so mean to me. These leave an impression in the unconscious. It happens because of what we call chintya. Chintya, I think in Hindi means worry. Is that correct? Yes? Yeah. In Sanskrit, it's got a little bit richer meaning. It means after the fact, mental rumination over an event or an experience. So rather than staying in the present, something happens, and then after the fact, I say, oh, that pizza was so good. Where was this place? Zachary's. Oh, we should come back to Zachary's. Or that person, what a jerk. I need to avoid that person. I'm simplifying it, but we have millions of these, which we've developed in this lifetime and in previous lifetimes. Now, listen very carefully. A vasana has two powers, avarana shakti and vikshepa shakti. Avarana shakti means covering or veiling power. Vikshepa shakti means projecting power. So the first thing a vasana does is, in my mind, it robs me of self-experience. I spiritually go to sleep. I do not know that I am Brahman. Varana Shakti. Then the projecting power, Vikshepa Shakti. First thing the mind projects, Jiva Bhavana. I think I'm a person. Then a world of name and form perceived as separate from me. It's out there. That whole phenomenon is what the Buddhists call dependent origination. They arise together. third element we call kartavya, struggle. This feeling that I'm a person, jiva bhavana, feels incomplete. I have a feeling of spiritual impoverishment. I either need to get something from the world or I need to fix or improve me. And the kartavya is serious struggle towards that goal. Obligatory action. Those three elements are the mind. Those three elements are samsara. Those three elements are the result of vikshepa shakti. Avarana shakti, non-apprehension of myself as Brahman. Vikshepa shakti, I think I'm a person and I have the struggle of ego. Any questions about this? If I'm in meditation, mind's tuned up. I have that sense, oh, I am that Chidakasha, that space of pure awareness. For that moment, your mind is freed from vasana. Shankara uses the metaphor of the algae on the tank in South India. So in South India, near the villages, they have these tanks where the women come down in the morning to get water. And moss, algae, grows on the tanks. So the women take their jars and they put them on the ground. And then they go like this to splash the algae away. And they get the jars full of water and they put them on their heads and then they walk back up to the compound. And then the moss comes back and covers the tank. So you and I in meditation or in satsang, move the moss away for a bit. But then, as Swamiji used to say, they leave the Vedanta on their seats when they leave. Be very clear in the presence of the Guru. But by the time you reach your car, I don't know what I'm going to do about my problem. It's all back. And you never see it begin. The scriptures say ignorance is beginningless. That doesn't mean it's a billion years old. It means I never see it begin. A dream is beginningless. Nobody sees the credits roll at the beginning of a dream. When you're dreaming, the mind projects an unexamined, assumed cause and effect past. There you are in a bathtub floating in the ocean. You never think, how did I get from my bed to this bathtub floating in the ocean? It just never occurs to you. So also, when the Avarana Shakti comes down and veils the mind, I never see it begin. Now, ignorance has no beginning, but it has an end. Give you a worldly example. I'm thinking of an arithmetic problem. For how long have you not known what I'm thinking of? Ask me what problem I'm thinking of. 2 + 1 is equal to 3. Your ignorance disappeared. So also, our spiritual ignorance comes to an end when I recognize myself. How? Investigate. Atma vicharena, by means of investigation into the self. Egoism always says, resolve the struggle of ego. I'll be happy when, it'll be better if. Yoga says, get out. Shut up and get out. Stop the whole process of the ego-driven thinking. If I think I'm a person, I'm deluded. Then turn the attention back on the self. Go out. Who am I? Now, in the beginning, the scriptures recommend devotion and karma yoga to purge some of our vasanas, especially karma yoga. We exhaust our vasanas, we live through them. And if we're intelligent in our karma yoga, we don't create new ones. But that's just to thin the mind a bit. Real way we get rid of vasana, viveka, and vairagya. Discriminate between the real and the unreal, the self and the not self. Viveka. Vairagya. That desire to give up attachments to enjoyments gained through the senses and identification with any form of self. Those are the two things that keep vasana in place. Attachment and identification. Really important to understand this frame and the technology of vasana purgation, because that's what we do. In the end, all of yoga, whatever form you're following, is some methodology for vasana exhaustion and purgation. If we don't do that, we may huff and puff with our pranayama, do all that sort of stuff, and we may get some wackadoodle mind states. But then we come back to our ordinary lives, and we're still sansaris, caught up in the world of suffering. This is foundational. Any thoughts on this?
I have a question.
Yes.
Earlier you were talking about Jada Samadhi and how it's caused by remaining vasanas.
Yes.
Is that like a stepping stone state, or is that like a divergence, like that you don't want to go down? Kind of like, is that something that's supposed to happen in your process, or is it a distraction?
Well, I wouldn't call it either. If you have, you're having a jada samadhi if you still feel like a person. And if you're not clear, you're going to think, I just need to do more pranayama, do huff and puff even more. But as long as when you come out of meditation, come out of that jada samadhi, you maintain your attachments and your identification, your mind the egoism will stay in place. In the end, where does Raja Yoga and Vedanta meet? Viveka and Vairagya. Or the way Patanjali calls it, Abhyasa Vairagya Cha. That's directly out of Yoga Sutra. Did that make sense?
Yeah, I'm trying to like think literally what it would feel like. Like, is Jetta Samadhi when you're like sitting there, you're like, I'm not thinking of anything right now. I'm not thinking of anything.
Exactly.
Okay.
But Alan's still there.
I'm not thinking of anything.
Yeah. Exactly. All right. Any other questions on this point?
Jim, this is Fang. I've got two somewhat related questions on vasanas.
All right.
So the first one is around the two examples you just gave earlier about what a vasana is. One is like, I don't, this person doesn't rub me the right way, so therefore I dislike this person. Another one was, I think, we went to this great restaurant, I want to go back. I guess are certain vasanas much more detrimental than other vasanas when it comes to the spiritual path? Because I imagine the restaurant example feels like it's one of those things that's more of a preference for most people. And that brings me to my second question, which is somewhat related, which is Swamiji himself, you mentioned before, had preferences for, fast cars and spicy food. But I guess the difference with him is, for him, it was always a preference, right? If he couldn't get the spicy food, if he couldn't get in the fast car, it wasn't a big deal. So my question is, for the vasanas you mentioned, that let's say you dislike a person, but it's not so much that like, if you had to have a meal with this person, even if you dislike them, you're fine with it. But your preference is generally not to be around that person. Is that okay?
Let me tell you more about Swamiji. So when he was young and he was doing sadhana, he walked thousands of miles. He walked from Rishikesh to Uttarkashi to Gangotri to the Char Dham, did them all. He walked. He came down onto the plains, went to places in Lahore, Delhi, stuff like that. He walked all those places. And when he was up in Uttarkashi studying with Swami Tapovanam, one meal a day, and it was a roti, piece of bread. That's all he had to eat. So we can't fool ourselves. Now, if you can eat roti and walk everywhere, and you can do that for the rest of eternity, even if you get a car and a good South Indian meal, you know you're not attached. I should probably tell that part of the story too. I don't know if that's helpful, Fang.
Yeah, that is helpful, Jim. That is helpful.
Now,
So long as there's no attachment, then it's because I guess my question is, the vasanas is a form of attachment, right? It's like I suppose the question is, if it's a preference, it's not that big of a deal. But if it's like, I must have this, otherwise I'm going to be unhappy, that type of attachment, then it's painful, because all of us have some sort of
who
vasana.
can figure that out? You
Okay.
know that the mind is freed from vasana when you know you're Brahman. If you think you're a person, even a person with preferences, you have vasana. It's that simple. First power of a vasana is a varana shakti. The second power is vikshepa shakti. The first projection of the mind and ignorance is Jiva Bhavana. I think I'm a person. So if you're sitting there, oh, I'm not attached to going to the restaurant. I think I'm doing better with my yoga. I guess this is okay. I am advancing. You're a fool. You're caught in ignorance like anybody else. But for example, in your meditation, when everything's quiet and you're very clear, oh, I'm the witnessing consciousness. There is no real thing. Doesn't exist. Does that make it a little clearer?
That does, Jim. That does make it very clear. Thank you.
So I call this the fortune cookie in the dream. So imagine you have a dream and you dream you're going to a Chinese restaurant and you get a fortune cookie, and the fortune cookie, you break it open, the little thing says, don't believe anything that's going on, you're in a dream. So the fortune cookie in the dream in this waking state is, if I feel like a person, I'm deluded. I'm in the dream of egoism, without exception. Now, which is more real, a pleasant dream or a nightmare? They're both unreal. So, what ultimately holds my egoism in place is vasana. So even if you're studying the path of Raja Yoga, ultimately you must practice vairagya, detachment. There's no other way. Some of us, it can take lifetimes. Get this up, that up, this up. Others of us, we're just sick and tired of the whole damn mess. I give it all. All right. Any other questions on this point? Next verse.
दृढ़ भावनया त्यक्त पूर्वापरि विचारणं यत् आदानं पदार्थस्य वासना सा प्रकीर्तिता. The seizing of objects by firm idea or imagination, abandoning the investigation of or reflection on the earlier and later states is declared as vasana or mental impression.
Read that again.
The seizing of objects by firm idea or imagination, abandoning the investigation of or reflection on the earlier and later states is declared as vasana or mental impression.
Yes. So when I'm no longer present to the now, and I'm worrying over the future, regretting the past, and I'm seizing on those, this is caused by vasana, and it creates vasana. The worldly example of this that I like to use is someone who goes out drinking on Friday night and drinks too much. And they wake up Saturday morning and they have upset stomach and a headache. Friend calls up and says, oh, let's go to brunch. And you go and you say, oh, I just feel terrible. And you say, gee, I think I might have the flu or a cold. And your friend says, oh, have a Bloody Mary. That'll fix it. So what do? A withdrawal is actually the result, or I mean, a hangover is withdrawal from alcohol poisoning. That's literally metabolically what it is. But if we don't know that, we're in denial. And then we reinfect the body with the Bloody Mary. Yeah, might as well go out and party all afternoon. Go to the local beer bus. Well, I really didn't need to go to work on Monday. Oh. That's how that syndrome starts. That's just a very gross form of what we do. Who has ever had the experience that you go to sit in meditation and you're just antsy? You know, you're restless. It's just not working today. I'm just gonna have to get up and do something. Go do the dishes, or your mind's racing about work or relationship. Who's had that experience? That's a spiritual hangover. That is the result of vasana sown at a previous time. How do you know what you are attached to? When you're sitting in meditation, what are the repeated thoughts that come up? Is it some issue with a parent? You think about food all the time. You think about sex all the time. Think about work. Does that keep coming up? You may be pretty disciplined. You set that aside, go back to your japa. But that'll give you an indication of what your vasanas are. Sitting in meditation and you start to confront your loneliness. It's amazing how many of us are lonely. What does ego say? Well, the solution to that is find a person, take a hostage. It's just a vasana. Your nature is poor. You're full. Ego strategy. Find something in the world to fix the feeling. Yoga's strategy. Just don't do something. Sit there. Any thoughts, any questions about this? Now, many of you have done a Vipassana retreat. I have no structure to shepherd you through those sorts of things. I highly recommend that you do that more than once. But if you do a 10-day retreat, 2-week retreat, a 30-day retreat, and you're sitting all day for most of the day, what you'll find is the stuff will come up. And if you do nothing, you don't reinfect the mind through action, it will start to undo the hridaya granthi, the knots of the heart, come out of the unconscious into our field of awareness, and then they dissipate. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
भावितं तीव्र संवेगात् आत्मना यत्तदेव सः भवत्याशु च तद्रूपो वासना विवशीकृतः. Whatever is imagined resolutely by oneself, he is only that. Soon he becomes of the nature of that, brought under the control or dependent on mental impressions.
So the Master Jesus said, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Same idea. So if your thought is, I'm a terrible person, I'm anxious, I'm lonely, you're caught up in your story, perhaps from your family of origin, I'm the victim of an abusive parent, I came from a dysfunctional family, or even other things like, I come from a high-born priestly caste, I come from an aristocratic family. My family has generational wealth. All these identifications, we keep rehearsing these thoughts. As a person thinks in his heart, so they are. Any thoughts on this? I want to talk a little bit about our attachment to the stories. Usually when we think of attachment, we think of enjoyment. Oh, I'm attached to having nice things because there were nice things in my parents' home. I was taught to appreciate classical music, so I'm attached to that. That's who I am. Or we did ritual in our family. We are Brahmin, so I'm attached to that. But we can be attached to the negative story. Oh, I'm somehow unique and different from other people because I had a horrible grandmother. I'm unique and different because I was sexually abused as a child. That's who I am. Or there was some trauma. My brother was killed in a car accident. I have PTSD from that. But if we keep living those stories, keep going back to them, we can be attached to our sorrow. And both need to be given up. What is your real nature? Chid Akasha, the space of awareness itself. Or as Shankara says, Chidananda Rupam, Shivoham, Shivoham. I am of the form, the nature of bliss consciousness. I am Shiva. I am auspiciousness. Or he says in Brahma Jnanavali, Asanguham, unattached. All these aids to practice meditation. If I think I'm a person, I'm deluded. My mind is under the throes of vasana. Vasana has two powers. Covering power of Arana Shakti. Non-apprehension of myself as Brahman. Vikshepa Shakti, projecting power. Jiva Bhavana, a goal and struggle. Next verse.
Prapashyate yadaivaita sadvastvati vimudhyati vasana vegavaivashyat swarupam prajahati saha. He is confused that this here, which he surely sees, is the real thing. He forsakes his natural state on account of having lost control over himself through the force of mental impressions.
So what happens to the fool? First of all, let's talk about the mark of the person of steady wisdom. Shankara says, who's a full knower of the Supreme, meaning under all circumstances, that person knows I am Brahman. Who has retired into the Supreme. The mind no longer extroverts into the world. Craving. It stays home. Who's as calm as a fire that has burned up its fuel. I love that phrase. What was the fire before the fuel got burned up? Raging inferno. Then through practice. It's all no longer afflicted by desire. Whose Daya Sindhu, an ocean of compassion. Now, if you're not there, Amarana Shakti, Vikshepa Shakti, one. I think I'm a person. Even if I think I'm a good person, or I think I'm a worm. And I think the world out there is separate from me. Shankara will use the term anyonya adhyasa. Adhyasa means superimposition. Anyonya adhyasa means mutual superimposition. What does it mean? It means I superimpose upon the self the qualities of the not self. and I superimpose upon the not self. I externalize the qualities of myself. First superimposition, I think I'm my body, or I think I'm my body plus my personality. I'm Jim, I'm the person. I have this history, I have these qualities. Get out of my way. But then, who am I really? I'm witnessing consciousness. Then the other, avyasa, superimposition. Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. Brahman alone is real. The phenomenal world is illusory. The names and forms are like a hologram. But what do? I take my own nature, which is Sat Chit Ananda, existence, consciousness, and bliss, and I otherize it. I see Vinayak over there. He has existence separate from me. Not only that, he has consciousness, awareness that's separate from me. I may not even like it. Then I superimpose my Ananda. You make me so happy. And the next day, you make me unhappy. Mutual superimposition. I superimpose upon myself the qualities of the not self. I superimpose, I otherize the not self and externalize my own self nature. Then I got to go chasing it. Instead, for the woman of wisdom, who am I? Aham Brahmasmi. I am that ground of being. What is this world? Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. This world is verily Brahman. It's changeless, immutable consciousness. What about the names and forms? Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. Brahman alone is real. The forms are just holograms. How has this world come about? It appears real to me because of my firm belief in that by means of sankalpa. Undo that ignorant paradigm. I love the term remind yourself. Remind. Change the mind. I'm going to remind something. At least start by being open to the possibility. The world is like. Take it so seriously. Any thoughts on this? One more.
Yat avastuni vastutvam tat chittam vidhi raghava dridhabhyasam padarthaika vasanat ati chanchalam chittam sanjayate janma jaramarana karanam. Raghava, know that as the mind which perceives reality in unreality. On account of mental impressions solely of objects, the mind which is of firm habit and extremely fickle becomes the cause of birth, old age, and death.
Yes. So I see something that appears but is not real, and I am convinced that it's real. And once I take it as real, my thoughts and feelings start to go down that rabbit hole. And we see this so powerfully in a worldly way. I was listening to the news earlier. The head of the National Archives has sent out a message, an email to all the people who work for the National Archives, warning them that people are out to hurt them. These are not evil people who want to do this. They're just horribly deluded. I mean, they're librarians, for God's sake. But because of the media they hear, these people get these firm ideas. Oh, they're the enemy. They're taking away our country. They're out to screw us. We got to stop them by violence. And that seems real. Yogis understand all of this looks pretty. Seen, but not real. Train tracks meeting in the distance. Seen, but not real. Rainbow in the sky. Let's go drive to see the end of the rainbow. No. Seen, but not real. Your jet airliner coming in for a landing. You see the big fluffy cotton looking clouds. Oh my God, we're going to bounce on the clouds. Seen, but not real. Brahma Satya Jaganitya. Brahman alone is real. All of the names and forms of the Jagat. Nitya. Illusion. Vaikatya. False. And that includes the personal sense of self. Chaya, it's a shadow self. It's a phony self. It's no more real than the dream self. Experience, but not real. All right, good place to stop. What verse are we on for next week?
11, 12.
11, 12. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. I can hang out for a bit if people want to stay either in person or online. Can you turn off the recording though? If anybody has questions or anything they want to talk about.